Michael Kaskey-Blomain joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, covers the Sixers and the NBA for 97.3 ESPN.com, as well as 24/7 Sports. Mike, how you doing on this Saturday?
Josh, I'm doing pretty well, man. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. Well, you and I didn't know this when we talked initially yesterday, but Kawhi has decided, and the ripple effects are massive. First of all, just kind of give me your initial impression of Kawhi. I opened up the show saying I kind of felt this was going to happen all along. It always seemed like he was going to Toronto just for a year, and then he was going to go to the Clippers. So, kind of just give me and the audience, your reactions to Kawhi choosing the Clippers and all the ramifications that go along with that.
Yeah, the Clippers just seem like the most fitting destination for Kawhi, Josh. Like you said, I think, a lot of people assumed even after they won the title that he was probably heading to Los Angeles. There was, enough smoke coming from his team that's, where he wanted to be. We had heard that going back to last summer when he was still in San Antonio and the Spurs were looking to trade him, that his preferred ultimate destination was to be back home in Los Angeles. And, just with his personality and the way, obviously, the Lakers in general are a more flashy franchise than the Clippers, with a lot more history. And then just the way the rosters are currently constructed, the Lakers obviously are, a very top-heavy team with two huge superstars in LeBron and Anthony Davis, whereas the Clippers, a little more under the radar, a little more built from top to bottom. And it just seemed to fit Kawhi a little bit better in terms of, his low-key nature. So, I wasn't shocked at the end of the day that that's where he decided to go. I was more shocked, that he was able to, really get the Thunder in on this and bring Paul George, aboard with him. That's a player. We had heard nothing all summer about, rumblings from out OKC that Paul George was on the trading block or the Thunder were looking to move him. To me, that really came out of left field, and that's a duo, probably the two best perimeter two-way players in the NBA. So them on the same team, I think it's going to be definitely a sight to see for the Clippers. And, for the Sixers, I think it's obviously a good thing because it gets, probably the, top 2-3 player in the league out of the East, and it makes it, even more wide open. The Raptors are, maybe still, maybe still a playoff team without Kawhi, but I don't think anyone is expecting them to be, a team that's going to come out of the East next year. Right. So it's, just wide open for the first time in a while, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, before we touch on the Sixers in the East a little more, I just want to finish up with the Clippers. You also got to give everybody involved credit, too. I mean, Sam Presti get the best haul he possibly could, considering everything involved. In the Clippers, yeah, you give up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but you only gave up basically two players in a trade that didn't deplete your entire roster. That's still a very good roster that Paul George and Kawhi are joining. It's not like LeBron and AD and they're trying to find spare parts of anybody who they could sign. Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, these are some good players and a very good coach in Doc Rivers. And you got to think that the Clippers, the wait paid off for them.
Absolutely, Josh. They, their team, similar to, what people said about the Brooklyn Nets, they've done everything right over the past couple of years in terms of, building that thing organically. They really quickly rebounded from, it was just 2 years ago that the Clippers were Lob City, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and JJ before he came to Philly, a team that was, a perennial contender in the West. And, they've undergone since then a complete, overhaul. They had Tobias Harris, obviously, as the best player for, the first half of last season. They put a lot of good, role players in place. Doc Rivers, obviously a great coach that's still there. They bring in Jerry West into that front office who's, had success everywhere he's been throughout his time in the league. So, they put all the pieces in place. And like you said, it was certainly a gamble, and the trade itself is a gamble, but it's a gamble that you make, 10 out of 10 times when you look at, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's a nice piece. Gallinari played well. And, first-round draft picks are obviously a commodity in the league. But if you have an opportunity not only to bring in Kawhi on a 4-year deal, but also bring in another, top 5. He was third in MVP voting, Paul George, last year. You bring him in on, he still has 4 years left on the max deal that he signed last year. So now you got, two of the top 5, 6 best players in the NBA locked up for the next half decade. And the ability to build around them. I would say the Clippers are in, as good as position as any team in the league really moving forward now.
Let's flip it back to the Eastern Conference. Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining me here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter for all your Sixers and NBA coverage at The Real Mike KB on Twitter. Mike, so now Toronto, major step back without Kawhi. Celtics step down without Al Horford. It really feels like now the Eastern Conference, the top of the conference is two teams, the Sixers and the Bucks. And I don't say that to be disrespectful to the Pacers or anybody else, but I think most people can look at the Eastern Conference and say it's two behemoths and everybody else. Am I right?
That's definitely how it looks on paper right now, Josh. Obviously, it's still early July. There's some things are going to flesh out over the next couple months before the season starts. But when you look at the East, how it was, just a couple months ago compared to what it looks like now, you'd look at the Raptors, obviously the defending champs. They're, like you said, going to take an enormous step back without Kawhi. They're going to be, probably fighting for contention. I think they'll still be a playoff team, but we're not, certainly not talking about a title contender. And I think same with Boston. They lost, not only Al Horford, they lost Kyrie, a lot of Terry Rozier, a lot of players that contributed to that team are not there. I think the depth that they've had over the past couple of years is now gone since they've had to move, some of the guys that they lost now have to move up and replace some of those guys, and the depth just isn't there. So you look at, the Sixers and the Bucks, and, I'm a little uneasy declaring the Sixers the team to beat in the East this early in the season. But if you look on paper, the Bucks, very similar to the team that they had last year. They didn't make any, huge additions. Their big play was bringing back Chris Middleton, obviously on a max deal, and Robin Lopez. But, they lose Malcolm Brogdon. They just didn't take a step forward to me. I don't think they necessarily got much worse. But the Sixers are a team that, for the third time in 11 months, completely reshaped their roster, and at least on paper right now, top to bottom, have the most talent in the Eastern Conference.
Mike, when you think about the Bucks, and I'm getting some text messages today, people are saying that they feel like the Bucks were a bit of a one-hit wonder last year. I don't think that's a fair assessment because people don't realize that Giannis is a guy. I mean, this is a guy who. What was he? He barely could play basketball when he first came into the NBA. No offense to him. He was a freak athlete, but he couldn't shoot free throws. He couldn't shoot jump shots. And now the guy who's going out there winning league MVP, becoming arguably one of the best players in the league. And if I'm a Sixers fan, I can't get too confident because if Giannis keeps getting better, it's going to make the path to the NBA Finals just more and more difficult.
Josh, you can't, as long as Giannis is in Milwaukee moving forward, that team is going to be a contender. I do think that there's question marks, about all the other players around him, in Milwaukee moving forward in terms of that, if that's a championship team. I think we kind of saw the ceiling of that team in the regular season this year. They were obviously the best regular season team. But once it came to that matchup against Toronto, and Kawhi was guarding Giannis, the other players around him were just extremely limited. And it doesn't seem like they did, at least to my eye so far, much to address, those issues to get, secondary scorers or other guys around Middleton and Giannis at this point. So I certainly don't think you can count them out, but I also don't think that you necessarily view them as, a powerhouse moving forward. But as long as they have Giannis, like you said, that's a guy that's, obviously just won the MVP award. He's only getting better. He's still in his, mid-20s. He's, probably not even in his prime yet. His shot is developing. So as long as he's there, they're going to be a team that you can't take lightly. But I do think it's fair to question, the supporting cast around him.
Mike, of the Sixers' main three young stars, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, who's the one guy that you're looking at going in the next season and saying, that's the guy who absolutely, positively has to be the man to step up next year?
It's awesome, Josh, because I think that, you could honestly make a case that it would be all three. Joel obviously is the best player on this team. I think that for them to fully reach their potential, he has to be the guy. But I think when you started to ask that question, the first player that popped into my mind, and I'm sure most of the people listening are thinking the same thing, it has to be Ben Simmons. He has to take that step next year to be the clear-cut number two. This year, obviously, he, between the trades. It was only his second season still, his first year making an all-star team. You bring Jimmy in, which obviously, took the ball out of Ben's hands, made Jimmy that, pretty much his second offensive option most of the time. But, at this point, going into his third season, Ben needs to, not he's a great player as it is, but he needs to take that next step and step up next season and, continue and take that step from, he's an all-star. He needs to develop into a superstar. It's not just the shot. Obviously, that's 1A. I think we all expect to see the shot improve, but, just little things. Improve on the defense. He has potential to be, an all defensive player with a couple improvements on that end of the floor. I think he could learn to take care of the ball a little bit better. And, of course, the shot is the main thing. So I think that Ben obviously has I guess if you want to use the word pressure going into next season for the Sixers, I think he probably has the most in terms of the guy that has to, step up and take that next step in his development to really get this team to their full potential.
We saw a little bit of the Summer League last night. Shake Milton, Zaire Smith both looked pretty good yesterday. Of the guys coming off the bench, not named Mike Scott, 'cause I think we all know what Mike Scott brings to this team. Who's the guy you feel like?
No bitch.
What's that?
He ain't no bitch.
Yeah, right. So for Mike Scott, who is aside from him, who is the guy off the bench that you think really needs to step up next year? Because this bench is going to have a different feel to it. It's going to have a different look starting at the season. Starting last season, the bench really, there are a lot of question marks, and going into this year, there are question marks as well, but they're very different question marks. So who's the guy not named Mike Scott that you're looking at and saying, if that guy makes that turn next year, this bench is going to be very good?
You mentioned him in the opening of that question, Josh. I think it's Zaire Smith. I think he's, obviously a kind of a question mark right now for exactly what he's going to be for this team this season. But he was a guy last year that was, a guy that the Sixers valued really highly in that draft. He was one of the more athletic players coming out of that 2018 draft, one of the top defenders in that draft. And I think we saw yesterday, obviously it's Summer League. We don't take too much out of it, but athleticism and ability is athleticism and ability no matter where you're doing it. And we saw him hopping, out of the gym to throw down some alley-oops. We saw great defensive instinct and ability to get out on the break. And I think, it's a little tough to expect too, you don't want to say Zaire, you expect him to be this, the automatic answer for the Sixers off the bench to his first real season in the league. But I think if he's the guy that can come in and contribute to his on paper potential, what he projects to be, what I think Brett Brown thinks he can be in this league, that's a starting caliber wing player coming off the bench for you, a guy that could be, potentially an all defensive caliber player, a good, a solid wing player that can, hopefully get in out in transition, finish around the rim, maybe stretch the floor a little bit. So, I mean, if Zaire, he's going to be a piece to this team moving forward. If he can, really live up to some of his potential this year, that's, I think, a huge X factor for the Sixers.
And, Mike, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time here on Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Again, follow Mike on Twitter at The Real Mike KB for all your Sixers and NBA news. Is it just me, or did it feel like Shake Milton was auditioning for the backup point guard job yesterday?
Yeah, fair to say, Josh. And I think that's the way he views it. He finally has a little stability in terms of, they locked him up on a multi-year deal. And his main competition now is, Neto, who they brought in on a minimum deal, who's, penciled in right now with that spot. But I don't think there's any guarantee. So I think Shake's looking at it as in, heading into training camp and the rest of this summer league. Obviously, there's, basically it was kind of an audition for him to show the coaching staff that he's, dynamic enough, a good enough playmaker. He didn't shoot well yesterday, obviously, but I think he still did some positive things out on the floor. So I think that, right now you'd probably say he'd be the third guard, but the way he's looking at it is, he might have an opportunity to slide in and take that backup role. And, he should feel that way. I think that's a good way for him to look at it, especially after the Sixers made a commitment to him that they obviously feel, he has some value to them moving forward.
Mike, appreciate your time here on a Saturday. Hope you get to enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully there's no more earthquake tremors in Las Vegas so we can actually get to finish some of these Summer League games.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And who would think that wouldn't even be the biggest story after last night?
Absolutely nuts. Well, thanks to Woj waking us all up in the middle of the night, we got to be distracted again. So.
Yeah, very, very true, Josh.
Mike, have a good weekend.
You too, man. Thank you.
You can follow him on Twitter at the real Mike KB. Covers the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.